When I was young, I thought learning English was all about memorizing grammar rules and writing long lists of vocabulary. My teachers filled the blackboard with verbs and tenses, and I copied them down carefully in my notebook. But when I tried to speak, my mouth froze. The words that looked so perfect on paper refused to come out. It felt like I was carrying around a beautiful dictionary in my head, but the lock on my mouth was too tight to open it. Then one day, I met a man who changed everything. He wasn't a professor or a famous teacher. He was just an ordinary neighbor who had lived in the United States for many years. His English sounded natural, smooth, almost musical. I asked him, "How do you speak so easily? How do the words just roll off your tongue?" He smiled and said something I never forgot: "Your brain already knows some English. You don't need to teach your brain more. You need to train your mouth." At first, that sounded strange. Train my mouth? I thought learning was about the brain, not the mouth. But then I realized something. Speaking isn't just about knowing words, it's about moving your lips, your tongue, your jaw in the right way, over and over, until it feels automatic. Just like a musician doesn't just read notes on paper, they practice with their hands until the music flows. Just like an athlete doesn't just study rules of the game, they train their muscles until the movements become natural. So I began to experiment. Instead of spending all my time with grammar books, I started talking to myself. In the morning, when I brushed my teeth, I looked in the mirror and said, "Good morning. How are you today?" At first, it felt silly. My voice sounded strange, and my tongue twisted around the words. But I kept going. I spoke to the mirror, to the walls, to the empty room. Slowly, my mouth began to loosen. The words that once felt heavy became lighter. I noticed something magical. When I repeated phrases again and again, my mouth began to remember them. Just like my hands remember how to tie my shoes without thinking, my mouth started to remember English sentences. When I needed them, they were ready. I didn't have to translate in my head anymore. I just opened my mouth, and the words came. This was the beginning of my journey to fluency, and it taught me something powerful. Learning to speak English is not about filling your head with endless words. It's about giving your mouth enough practice, enough repetition, enough training, until the movements become second nature. One afternoon, I sat in the park and listened to a group of children playing. They were shouting, laughing, throwing a ball back and forth. What amazed me was how fast they spoke, how easily the words tumbled out of their mouths. None of them stopped to think about grammar or vocabulary. They weren't translating. They were just speaking. That's when I realized children become fluent because they train their mouths first. They repeat what they hear 1,000 times, without fear, without hesitation. And soon, their mouths learn to dance with the language. So I asked myself, could I, as an adult, train my mouth the same way? Could I practice speaking like a child does, with repetition, with play, with sound, until English became part of me? I decided to try. Every evening, I chose a short phrase I liked. Something simple, like "It's a beautiful day," or "I'm ready to go." I repeated it while walking, while cooking, even while waiting for the bus. At first, I sounded robotic, like a broken record. But slowly, the phrases began to flow. My mouth learned the rhythm, the melody, the music of English. And each time I spoke with someone, those little phrases jumped out naturally. It was like planting seeds in the soil and then watching them bloom in real conversations. There were moments of frustration. Sometimes my tongue felt heavy. Sometimes I stumbled over the same phrase again and again. But I reminded myself that musicians practice scales, dancers practice steps, athletes repeat drills. Why should language be any different? My mouth was a muscle, and muscles need training. I began to notice progress in unexpected places. At the grocery store, when the cashier asked, "Do you need a bag?" I answered quickly, without panic. At the cafe, when the barista asked, "How's your day going?" I smiled and responded with ease. These were small victories, but they felt huge. They proved that training my mouth was working, and then something else happened, something even more exciting. As my mouth grew stronger, my confidence grew too. I no longer avoided conversations. I didn't hide behind silence. Instead, I looked for chances to speak, even if my sentences weren't perfect. I realized that fluency is not perfection. Fluency is flow. Fluency is courage. Fluency is training your mouth until English feels as natural as breathing. That night, as I sat by the window and thought about my progress, I remembered my neighbor's words, "Train your mouth." They echoed in my mind like a secret key. And I knew this was only the beginning of a much bigger journey, because once you start to train your mouth, you don't just learn to speak English, you learn to speak with freedom. With confidence, with life itself. The next stage of my journey began when I realized that speaking alone wasn't enough. I needed to bring my English into the real world, where conversations are messy, fast, and unpredictable. Talking to a mirror was good practice, but mirrors don't interrupt, mirrors don't laugh, and mirrors don't ask you to repeat yourself. I knew I had to step outside and let my trained mouth face real people. The first time I tried, I was terrified. I walked into a small cafe and ordered coffee. My heart beat faster than usual. I had practiced the phrase 100 times, "I'd like a cup of coffee, please." When the words came out, they weren't perfect, but they were clear. The barista understood, smiled, and gave me exactly what I asked for. I left the cafe feeling like I had just climbed a mountain. That little exchange was proof that my mouth training was working outside the safety of my room. From then on, I made it a game. I looked for opportunities to use my mouth in English every single day. At the grocery store, I asked questions about products, even if I already knew the answers. At the park, I greeted strangers with a smile and a simple good afternoon. At the bus stop, I practiced small talk about the weather. Some conversations were short, some awkward, but each one was like a workout for my mouth. And just like muscles grow stronger with exercise, my speaking became smoother, easier, more confident. There were times when people didn't understand me right away. Their eyebrows lifted, they leaned closer, they said, "Sorry?" And in the past, that might have broken me. I might have gone silent, ashamed of my accent or my mistakes. But now, I reminded myself, every stumble is just another drill for the mouth. So instead of giving up, I repeated myself, slowly, clearly, with courage. And almost always, the listener understood the second time. Each of those moments was a small victory, not a failure. What surprised me most was how much my ears and mouth worked together. The more I listened to real English, the easier it was to train my mouth to copy the sounds. I watched movies and repeated lines out loud. I listened to songs and sang along, even when I couldn't hit the notes. I treated English like music, letting the rhythm and melody sink into me. Slowly, my accent softened. My sentences began to flow with more natural rhythm. I realized I wasn't just training my mouth, I was teaching it to dance to the beat of English. One evening, I was at a friend's house for dinner. Everyone around the table was speaking English, laughing, telling stories. I sat there quietly at first, afraid to join in. But then a story reminded me of something funny from my own life. I felt the words rising inside me, and before I had time to overthink, my mouth opened. The story came out, clumsy in some places, but alive and real. Everyone laughed, not at me, but with me. In that moment, I felt like I belonged. My mouth had carried me into the circle of conversation. That was the night I truly believed I was becoming fluent. Looking back, I see that fluency didn't come from memorizing endless vocabulary lists or drilling grammar charts until my head hurt. It came from training my mouth every day, in small, ordinary moments. It came from repetition, from courage, from letting mistakes become part of the process. It came from trusting that my mouth, like any muscle, would grow stronger the more I used it. Of course, there were still days of doubt. There were mornings when I woke up and thought, will I ever sound natural? Will I ever stop making mistakes? But then I remembered the children in the park, how they played with language like it was a toy. They weren't afraid of mistakes. They weren't ashamed of mispronouncing a word. They just kept talking, kept repeating, kept laughing. And that's when I realized fluency isn't about perfection, it's about persistence. One afternoon, I sat down with a notebook and wrote these words to myself: your mouth is your instrument. Play it every day. Don't wait for the perfect moment. Don't wait for perfect grammar. Just play. That little reminder became my guide. Each day, I opened my mouth and let the words come, messy or not. And little by little, I felt myself crossing an invisible bridge. The bridge led from silence to sound, from hesitation to flow, from fear to freedom. On one side of the bridge, I was trapped in my head, always worrying about mistakes. On the other side, I was speaking with life, with confidence, with joy. And the key to crossing that bridge was simple: train your mouth. Now, whenever someone asks me, how can I speak fluent English? I smile and tell them the same thing my neighbor once told me: don't just train your brain. Train your mouth. I explain that fluency doesn't come from hiding behind books. It comes from moving your mouth, shaping the sounds, repeating them until they belong to you. It comes from practicing in mirrors, in streets, in cafes, in every little corner of daily life, and most of all, it comes from daring to open your mouth even when you're afraid. Because every time you speak, you are training. Every time you stumble, you are learning. Every time you repeat, you are building strength. Today, when I think about my journey, I feel grateful. English has given me more than words. It has given me connection, opportunity, friendship. It has allowed me to travel, to share my thoughts, to listen to stories from people all over the world. None of this would have been possible if I had kept my mouth locked, waiting for perfection. It was training, day by day, phrase by phrase, that set me free. So if you are listening to this story, wondering whether you too can become fluent, let me tell you, yes, you can. Your mouth is waiting to be trained. Don't be afraid of mistakes. Don't be afraid of sounding strange. Just begin. Begin today, with one phrase, one sentence, one breath. Speak it aloud. Repeat it. Make it yours. And tomorrow, do it again. Before you know it, your mouth will no longer resist. It will open with ease, and the words will flow like water. That is the power of training your mouth. That is the secret to speaking fluently, freely, confidently. And now, I leave you with the same invitation that once changed my life: don't just learn English in your head. Live it with your mouth. Speak it. Breathe it. Train it. Because the moment your mouth learns to dance with the language, fluency is yours. I share stories like this every day. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one.